Jai Hind. Today's lecture examines the global influence on India's strategic outlook, specifically in the context of India's foreign policy and broader global philosophical perspectives. India's strategic outlook is not formed in isolation. It is shaped by continuous interaction between external global forces and internal intellectual traditions. This makes it particularly interesting to study because it does not fit neatly into conventional categories of international relations theory. Unlike many states whose strategies are primarily shaped by material capabilities of our alliances structure, India's approach reflects a more complex synthesis on that combines historical experiences, geopolitical pressures, and philosophical ideas. The central argument of this lecture is that India's strategic outlook must be understood as a dynamic interplay between global structural forces and indigenous normative frameworks, rather than as a purely reactive or purely idealistic policy orientation. So, to begin with, it is important to understand what we mean by strategic outlook. A strategic outlook refers to the long-term orientation of a state toward the external environment, encompassing its security priorities, diplomatic behavior, and economic engagements. It is shaped not only by the immediate threats but also by historical memory, ideological commitments, and global transformations. India's strategic outlook is particularly complex because it operates within multiple layers of influences. On one level, it is shaped by global power structure such as bipolarity during the Cold War or multipolarity in the present era. On another level, it is influenced by philosophical traditions that emphasizes coexistence, ethical conduct, and global responsibility. The dual nature create both opportunities and tensions. While global forces often push states toward competition and power maximization, India's philosophical tradition often emphasize restraints and cooperation. Understanding how India navigates the tension is navigate this tension is central to this lecture. So, a strategic outlook is not static. It evolves in response to changing circumstances. It includes three major components: security strategy, economic orientation, and diplomatic posture. Security strategy involves how a state perceives threat and organizes its military and defense policies. Economic orientation relates to how it engages with global markets and institutions. Diplomatic postures reflect its approaches to alliances, partnership, and global governance. In India's case, these components are influenced not only by material actors but also by ideational factors. For instance, India's emphasis on strategic autonomy is not merely a tactical choice, it reflects a deeper commitment to independence and sovereignty rooted in its historical experiences. Similarly, its engagement with multilateral institutions is not only about gaining influence but also about promoting a rule-based and inclusive international order. Thus, India's strategic outlook must be understood as a combination of material capabilities and normative commitments rather than as a purely realist calculation. One of the most important global influences on India's strategic outlook is its colonial experience under British rule. Colonialism was not just a political or economic phenomenon, it was also a profound psychological and intellectual experience. It shaped India's understanding of power, sovereignty, and international relations. As a result, independent India developed a strong commitment to anti imperialism and sovereignty. This is evident in its consistent support for decolonization movements in Asia and Africa in the mid 20th century, which I have already told in the earlier lecture. For example, India has played an active role in supporting independence movement in countries like Indonesia and Ghana. This was not merely an act of solidarity. It reflected a broader strategic vision of creating a world order free from domination and exploitation. This colonial legacy also explains India's sensitivity to issues of external intervention and territorial integrity. which continue to shape its foreign policy even today, even in today's scenarios. There is also influence of the Cold War. The Cold War represents another major global influence on Indian strategic outlook. The bipolar structure of the international system forced the state to align with either the United States or the Soviet Union. However, India chose a different path, non-alignment. This decision was not a sign of weakness or indecision. Rather, it was a strategic choice aimed at preserving autonomy. By refusing to join either bloc, India was able to maintain flexibility in its foreign policy and avoid being drawn into great power conflicts. At the same time, India with both blocs. Uh, India engaged with both blocs, I should say. It received economic and technological assistance from both the United States and the Soviet Union, demonstrating a pragmatic approach to international relations. Thus, the Cold War shaped India's strategic outlook by reinforcing the importance of independence, flexibility, and balance in global politics, which we are also doing in today's scenario. So, the end of the Cold War marked a significant turning point. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, the bipolar structure gave way to more fluid and uncertain international system. At the same time, India faced a severe economic crisis which led to the liberalization reforms in 1991. These developments prompted a shift in India's strategic outlook. While it continued to value strategic autonomy, it also began to engage more actively with global markets and institutions. This period saw the emergence of what can be described as pragmatic engagement. India sought to integrate into the global economy while maintaining its independence in strategic decision making. This transition laid the foundation for India's current approach, while combines economic openness with strategic caution. So, moving further, the globalization has had a profound impact on India's strategic outlook. As India integrated into the global economy, it becomes increasingly interconnected with other countries in terms of trade, technology, and investment. This created new opportunity, but also new vulnerabilities. For example, dependence on global supply chains had made economic security a key concern. Similarly, technological independence has raised issues related to cyber security and digital sovereignty. At the same time, globalization has expanded India's diplomatic engagement. It now participates actively in global forums such as G20 and World Trade Organization. Thus, globalization has transformed India's strategic outlook from a relatively inward-looking approach to a more outward-oriented and interconnected strategy. Then, the rise of China is perhaps the most significant contemporary influence on India's strategic outlook. China's economic growth and military modernization have altered the balance of power in Asia. This has created both opportunities for cooperation and challenges for security. The existence of unresolved border disputes, particularly along the line of actual control, adds the layer of complexity. Incidents such as Doklam standoff in 2017 and the Galwan clash in 2020 have reinforced the perception of China as a strategic competitor. In response, India has adopted a more proactive approach, strengthening its military capabilities and expanding its strategic partnership. This has also led to a greater emphasis on the Indo-Pacific region, where India seeks to balance China's influence through cooperation with like-minded country or friendly foreign countries. So, another major influence in India's evolving relationship with the United States. Over the past 2 decades, India-US relations have transformed from mutual suspicion to strategic partnership. This shift has been driven by shared interest in areas such as security technology and regional stability. The development of Quad, comprising India, the United States, Japan, and Australia, illustrate these trends. While not a formal alliance, the Quad reflects a shared commitment to a free and open Indo-Pacific. At the same time, India has been careful to avoid becoming overly dependent on any single partner. This reflects the continued importance of strategic autonomy in its outlook. Thus, India's engagement with the United States represent a balance between cooperation and independence. Moving further, India's immediate neighborhood also plays a crucial role in shaping its strategic autonomy, what we call regional dynamics. South Asia is characterized by a range of challenges including political instability, economic disparities and security threats. India's approach to the region in guided by the neighborhood first policy, which emphasizes cooperation and connectivity. At the same time, the region presents security challenges, particularly in relation to cross-border terrorism and regional rivalries. India's role in the Indian Ocean region is also increasingly important given its strategic location and the growing presence of external power. Thus, regional dynamics requires India to balance cooperation and vigilance, making it a strategic outlook, making its a strategic outlook both proactive and cautious. So, next, the global governance and multilateralism. India's engagement with the global governance institution is another key dimension. India has consistently advocated for a more inclusive and representative international order, particularly through reforms of institutions like the United Nations Security Council. India has also played an active role in multilateral forums such as the G20 and BRICS, where it seeks to represent the interest of the global south. This reflects a broader commitment to multilateralism and collective decision making, which align with both strategic and philosophical consideration. So, if we talk about the philosophical influences, alongside these global influences, India's strategic outlook is also shaped by the philosophical traditions. Concepts such as Panchsheel, non-alignment and Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam provides a normative framework for its foreign policy, which we have already discussed in the last lecture. This ideas emphasizes peaceful coexistence, strategic autonomy and global unity respectively. While these principles may appear idealistic, they have practical implication. They shapes India's approach to diplomacy, encouraging a balance between assertiveness and restraints. So, moving forward, India's civilization identity is also an important factor, that is soft power and civilizational identity. Through initiatives such as International Yoga Day and cultural diplomacy, India projects an image of itself as a source of soft power. The Indian diaspora further strengthens the influence, acting as a bridge between the India and the other countries. The soft power complements India's strategic objective by enhancing its global image and influence. So, in recent years, non-traditional security issues have become increasingly important. Challenges such as climate change, pandemics and cyber threats require collective actions and innovative approaches. India has been actively involved in addressing these issues and emphasizing the importance of human security and sustainable development. So, what are the challenges? Despite these strengths, India's strategic outlook faces several challenges. Balancing ideals with realism remains a constant tension. Geopolitical pressure and resource constraints also limit its option. However, these challenges also highlight the need for a flexible and adaptive strategy. To conclude, India's strategic outlook is shaped by a complex interaction between global force and philosophical tradition. It reflects a continuous effort to balance power and principles, competition and cooperation. So, the last argument the last argument of this particular lecture, India's strategic outlook therefore is not merely reactive, it is an evolving attempt to reconcile the demands of power politics with the aspiration of a more just and cooperative global order. I rest my lecture here. Thank you.